the dynamic of it was not for me. Like, hey guys, what is up? My name is Kaylee. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a while. Thank you for being here. Today we are going to talk about the books that I DNF'd in 2019. Now, a goal of mine had been last year, at the beginning of the year, to DNF any books that I just wasn't feeling. It's something that I always had guilt over doing, and I always wanted to try and push through books even if I wasn't feeling them. So in 2019, I decided I wasn't going to play that game anymore, and if I put in a solid effort into a book and I just wasn't having it, then I wasn't having it, and I put it down. And thus, I have 9 books to talk about today that I wholly DNF'd. This doesn't count books that I started and read like a chapter or 2 of and just put aside. This is only books that I actually invested some time into and then decided at least 20+% through that it wasn't for me. They're probably in order from like timeline. So January through December, you'll see the books that I DNF'd as the year went by. Starting with Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. I wanted to love this. I absolutely love the cover. I am going to unhaul it, but it breaks my heart to unhaul because I just absolutely, I loved the cover. I loved the inner pages. I loved the naked book. I still have the bookmark in so you can see just how far I got, which was pretty well in 108 pages out of 330. So I got about a third of the way in, and I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in the magic. I wasn't interested in the storyline. I was making myself pick it up to read it. I tried it twice, 2 separate occasions. I even started back over the second time I tried, and it just wasn't for me. This is like a Russian-inspired fantasy that has to do with calling on gods to get power in the times that you need them, and the main girl, like, the gods talk to her in her head, and she's hunted because of that. And I just wasn't interested in it. Then for those of you that like follow Twitter and authors on Twitter, Emily A. Duncan kind of started to get a really bad rep in the middle of the year on Twitter for tweets that she tweeted about her writing and her books and her readers, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. And normally I can separate the two. You'll see a lot of that in this, maybe not a lot, but there's at least another book that I DNF'd that had similar circumstances where I already had DNF'd the book, but because of their presence as humans, I decided that I wouldn't try it again. So that's number 1. It also helped me set a goal this year. I'm not going to do a separate goals video, but I have a goal this year of not buying a whole lot of books. I will do Book of the Month Club, and any books that I really, really highly anticipate, like The King of Crows from Libba Bray, I will definitely be buying, but like, I'm going to try not to be pulled into the hype or very beautiful covers just because, so we'll see how that goes, but this is one of the reasons why. Next, I DNF'd Gods of Jada and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a book that I got an ARC of on NetGalley, and I like anticipated this. I had it pre-ordered, and then I got the ARC, and I started reading the ARC, and I think I read at least 40% of the book, maybe even a little bit more. It's a mythology-based story, and I love mythology, and I love folklore, and I love all of that having a base in fantasy, and I just couldn't get behind it. The main reason that I couldn't read it further, like I canceled my pre-order, it was on Book of the Month as a choice, and I saw tons of my friends choose it, and I kept wondering like what's everyone gonna think of it, but I didn't see a whole lot of reviews on it outside of mine. It was very like show don't tell, which is not something I say a lot about books these days, but I just felt like I was being told the information instead of slowly growing with the characters. It was just like, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And once it got to the part where the character, okay, so it reminded me of Cinderella in that, yeah, like the main character, the girl, is kind of like a slave to her family, and her cousin's really mean to her, her aunt is really mean to her, her grandpa's a big asshole, and like she accidentally calls on a god. She like unlocks this chest, and this god, his bones are in there, and he becomes human again, and he takes her to go on this journey, etc., etc. And a romance forms between them, even though she's like terrified of him and he has basically captured her and forced her on this journey. I could, like, the romance started, and I went on Goodreads to see what people were saying about the book, because at this point I had lost all my interest, and everyone that I had read the reviews of that didn't like it talked about how the romance became super heavy in the second half, and I gave up on it. Let me know down below if you've like read any of these books and liked them, and I don't know, man. I still feel guilty when I DNF a book, but I don't want to waste my time on books that I'm just not feeling, especially if I'm almost halfway through. So that's book number 2. Book number 3, I feel bad about for 2 reasons. One, Chelsea at Chelsea Darling Reads sent this book to me because she thought I would really like it, and then I decided to buddy read it with Lacey, my other good friend. I'll have everyone linked down below as usual. And I think at a 40%, I was like, I can't do this anymore, Lacey. I'm just not interested. And some of my good friends really, really like this book, and it's like one of their favorites, but it wasn't for me. And that is Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton. I really can appreciate aspects of this. There's definitely a level of polyamory. There's a lot of queer representation within this book, and it's very magically told, but I couldn't get into it. I don't know if it was the way the story was told. I don't know if it was the fact that there were so many characters to keep in your mind, or the fact that like it kind of goes in and out of present day, and like there's a woods, I don't know how to explain this. Basically, this town has to sacrifice like their best boy to the woods for this like demonic presence in order for their little community to thrive. And there's a lot of conflict within that, and the team of kids that like are the pool amongst who gets chosen in this round don't want to let the best boy go, and more than one person enters the forest, which is forbidden. So you're seeing scenes from the forest as well as like scenes from the hometown, and I couldn't get into how the story was told, unfortunately, so I DNF'd this. Next, if you remember, I already unhauled this book, but Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I had really, really high expectations going in. I actually watched the show and absolutely loved it, but the book just wasn't for me. I don't know if it was the way the humor was. I think Cody at Cody's Book Corner said that the humor is very British humor, and maybe I just wasn't connecting to it. Neil Gaiman's my favorite author, like hands down, he's up there at the top. And I've never read anything by Terry Pratchett, but knowing that they were good friends and that they have similar comedic writing styles, I really, really had high hopes for it. It just didn't follow through for me. And it was another book that I tried twice. I read part of it by myself and I got to like 30%, and then I listened to the audiobook and I think I got halfway through and I wasn't feeling it. So it was very surprising that I really liked the show. So I'd recommend watching the show if you've tried to read the book and didn't like it, or you have no interest in the book at all whatsoever. The show is incredibly good. It's basically about an angel and a devil that have to come together to prevent the apocalypse. And there's like a whole mix up of swapping the devil's child so that they've been watching this one kid grow up that they think is the Antichrist, but accidentally it's not him, it's another kid that was born at the same time at the same hospital. And there is a lot of humor within it, but I just wasn't connecting to it, and after 2 tries I gave up. Next is Geralds Game by Stephen King. I gave kind of a lengthy reason as to why I DNF'd it in one of my past wrap-ups, so I won't get too far into it, but I will say that it's a story about a husband and a wife that go away to a cabin. Their marriage is basically failing, and he's got like a very big kink for S&M style fantasies, and he ties his wife up to a bed and she tells him to stop. She doesn't want to go any further, and he has a heart attack and dies and leaves her chained to this bed. She has no access to the keys. She has no access to water. They're in the middle of nowhere, and she starts theoretically hallucinating things happening to her, but also she goes back in her memories to a relationship she had with her father that was very incestuous and pedophilic, and I couldn't do it. So again, I got about 40 to 50% through, and I just could not deal with the storyline of the father-daughter relationship, and I quit it. Next is one that makes me really, really sad, because Victoria Schwab is one of my favorite writers, and this was her first publication, so maybe I went into it with a bias thinking like, your first book isn't always going to be your best book, but it got republished and I absolutely loved this edition that Barnes & Noble put out. So I got it, and that's The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. I both tried to read it physically for, I believe, my owls in April, and then again during October for like the spooky season. I listened to the audiobook and I just didn't care. This is about a town. This boy appears, everyone knows everyone in this town. It's a small town. This boy appears out of nowhere one day and disappears just as rapidly, and then another boy goes missing, and they think that it is this boy that has appeared and disappeared. I just didn't care. And that's really all I can say about it, is I tried twice and I just wasn't invested. And it sucks because V.E. Schwab has written some of my absolute favorite works, and this is just not for me. And I've said before that V.E. Schwab is not my favorite YA author, but I really like her adult work, and maybe that's just where this falls. I feel like this next book stirred up a lot of controversy, and I had started reading it before that controversy happened, and a couple of my friends absolutely loved this and sung this book's praises, and I was really excited for the premise of it. And again, it was a cover by, like, loved the fact that it was sprayed edges and all of my favorite color. Well, my favorite color is red, but outside of that, my other favorite color. I just really liked the aesthetic of it and the idea of the story, and that is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I got 110 pages in, and I just felt like nothing was happening. This is written in a style that is not my favorite, which is that it's very long paragraphs instead of having action paragraph, or just action. There wasn't a whole lot of dialogue. It was just big chunks of long prose, and I followed Dark Dawn by J. Kristoff with this, which was another lengthy fantasy, so that might be part of the problem of trying to read this right after that. I was in a weird headspace because Dark Dawn was not what I wanted it to be for me personally, so I kind of just, I was hoping for something that this wasn't. I put it aside thinking maybe I'll try again when I'm in a different mood and I want something like a slower fantasy. And then this is the author I was referring to earlier that kind of had a thing happen online that left slight bad taste in my mouth, and I'm just not interested any longer in continuing in this book or further in the series, even though the concept is great. It's about a necromancer who, I mean, that's about it. It's about a queer necromancer, female, and that concept alone is super cool and badass, but I just wasn't feeling it. I mean, look, here's an example of the text. See how it's just long blocks of, that's how I felt like it all was for the 110 pages I read, despite it being beautiful. I think I'm gonna unhaul it. I love that I've kept my bookmarks in all of these so I can show you guys just how far I've gotten in some of them. The next one is also controversial because it ended up on some of my good friends' top books of the year, and people either loved it or really didn't like it, and I fell into the latter category, unfortunately, and that is Fixer Up by Tessa Bailey. I got incredibly far in, like more than halfway through. This is a story about a girl who is the youngest in her family. She is a clown for a living. Her family treats her like absolute garbage because they don't think she's an adult for her career choices. They baby her even though she's an adult now. And her childhood crush, which is her brother's best friend, who was a famous Major League Baseball player, comes to their hometown again because he is done with Major League Baseball from an injury, and they start hooking up. I did not like the family dynamics at all. I think that in and of itself was enough for me to not want to carry on in the story. But once it finally got to the smutty scenes, which took almost that far to do, I didn't like the dynamics. I know a lot of people really like the way that the main character, the baseball player, Travis Ford, spoke, like the way he dirty talked to our main character, Georgie, really hit it on the ballpark for a lot of people. I did not mean to make that Major League Baseball pun, but here we are. But it wasn't for me. I don't like stories where nicknames are overused, and whoo boy did he overuse nicknames for her. So I just couldn't get into it, and halfway through I was like, I'm not interested anymore in this dynamic, so DNF'd. And last but not least, this is really, I got 80% through this book before I realized I just didn't care how it ended. And I literally decided that on New Year's Eve. So this is my final DNF of the year, and that is Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. Chandler over at Chandler Ainsley really, really liked this story. And also Chelsea tried to read it and did not enjoy it that much either. Part of me liked parts of the story, and part of me really was uncomfortable with other parts of it. And it really comes down to, this is a dark romance about two high schoolers where they are pen pals from like 30 miles away from 5th grade up until they're seniors now in high school. And they've never met in real life, but they're kind of each other's only source of being able to be themselves. And one night, early on in the book, they meet in real life, except Ryan, the main girl, doesn't realize that she has met her pen pal Misha. But Misha knows the minute he sees her and hears her name. Like, there's no other Ryan in the world that would be here right now. So he meets her, but then something really bad happens to him that night and he cuts off communication with her. But on like some revenge mission, he ends up going to her school and being in her presence, but he goes by a different name, so she never finds out it's Misha, and they start like a sexual relationship that's very raunchy and dirty, and he's kind of cruel to her and she's pretty cruel back. And it's just, the dynamic of it was not for me. Like, I can get behind bad boys and I can get behind dirty talking and I can get behind problematic relationships, but I just did not like it. I think part of it was their age, the fact that they were like 17, 18 in high school, and part of it was just how they fucking treated each other was not up my alley, and especially in like the sex scenes and the things he said, and I just wasn't into it. When we got to the dramatic part where she realizes who he really is and the whole like breakdown that happens, I was like, you know what, whether they end up together or not, I don't really care. So DNF'd it, don't know how it ends, even though I think it was like 78% through, and I was like, I'm not gonna finish it before the new year, and I really don't want this to be my first read of the year, so cutting it. So that's it. Those are the 9 books that I DNF'd this year. I'm hoping to have less this year, but I'm also not going to be sad if I have to DNF books, because I think it really, my end of the year Goodreads overall rating average was 4.2, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I DNF'd so many books so readily, and I like that. I would rather spend my time, I read 163 books with an average rating of 4.2. I would much rather spend my time reading books that I actually like than pushing myself to read books that I'll give 2 stars or less just to say that I finished it. That's my perspective. I know a lot of people think that you should get to the end of a book. That's totally fine. Read how you want to read, but I'm cool with DNFing. So that brought you this video today. Let me know down below if any of these books were books you tried and didn't like, or you absolutely loved. I love that books can really resonate with people so differently. So I hope 2020 is better for all of us. And thank you for being here. Like if you like this video, subscribe if you're new here and want to see more content from me. I post all of my social media links down below. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads. I hope you are having a great day and a happy new year and have some really great bookish goals in store for you this year. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.